item is Mr. Donohoe will be giving us an overview of the Upper Magnolia Green East, case 21SN0675, and Upper Magnolia Green West, case 21SN0676.
Yes, good afternoon again, Madam Chair, members of the Commission, Director Gillies. What we're going to do this afternoon is this work session is of course for Upper Magnolia Green to talk through that rezoning request. We've broken it into three parts. So we have Garrett Hart here this afternoon to talk a little bit about it from an economic development perspective. I'm going to follow that with a planning overview. And then we have Brent Epps here, Director of Transportation, to talk a bit about the transportation piece. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Garrett to talk to us a little bit about the economic development piece.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the Commission. It's a pleasure to see you again. I don't feel like I get out to get in front of you enough, so I'm glad to be here. Wishing you happy holidays. The planning department has asked me to talk to you guys a little bit in the beginning of, and a little bit of a history lesson on why the board is asking for this action, for this rezoning. And I'm going to spend a few slides going over why that is and why we're doing what we're doing. The strategic plan for Chesterfield County is very specific in what it expects the Economic Development Department to achieve, and that is to create quality jobs for citizens now and in the future, and to continue to create more jobs for the citizens. It is also to increase and grow the commercial tax base in order to provide revenue for the fine services and that the county delivers and the reason people choose to live here, and to do that without overburdening the residential housing tax rate. To accomplish that task, we perform lots of things, but we discovered, and I have been before this commission before talking about this, that one of the biggest threats to the development of that goal is the lack of product. It has become very clear to us, especially at the end of 2017 and 2018, that we were running out of large industrial parcels of more than 100 acres. We were not being able to compete with the region or the state or the nation for projects that we would very much like to have because of the quality of their jobs and because of the amount of their capital investment. It was very clear to us that we needed to move forward with some type of study on where the next site could come from to keep us competitive. There we go. There's the timeline. So at the end of 2019, the Economic Development Department began to review parcels in the county that were capable of providing multiple large parcels for development, for creation of a large number of jobs and high capital investment. We completed that study and discussed it with the board in the first quarter of 2020. The Upper Magnolia site was included in the finalists of that group of things that we were sites we were discussing. And also during 2019, Mr. Carroll has mentioned this, and I know Mr. Owens was aware of this too. We were approached by the owners of Upper Magnolia to develop the property for as many as 5,000 to 8,000 homes. They were talking to us about how do we rezone it in order to get that much density, in order to pay for the construction of the Parkway through the property. So the development community was looking at how to develop it under its current zonings, but with a modification on density. It's currently zoned to hold at least 1,400 homes. So based on that, and the Upper Magnolia size would allow us to make a significant technology park while also being in an area where we would not impact dense residential development. The board directed us to begin negotiations with the owners of Upper Magnolia. They did this for three reasons. Upper Magnolia represented, as I just said, the best site for a large-scale technology village on infrastructure that was already planned to come to the county through the Parkway, the improvements of Otterdale and Duval, and as well as extension of water and sewer to get to the Coal Creek subdivision, so forth. So it was a large parcel of land available where we could extend utilities into the future and create a technology park. Secondly, it would allow the board, the commission and the board to reduce the overall residential density of the property. And then thirdly, and it's just as important as one, it allowed for us to have an opportunity to locate a middle school in that area, which was very needed. So they clearly, those were the decisionary goals when we went into negotiations. In December of last year, the board announced the purchase of the property, and during that announcement for the purchase, they made it very clear that their goals for the property were to create a technology village for quality job creation and capital investment, to lower the density of the residential capacity of the property, and to find a location of the middle school. Following the announcement, at the direction of the board, we began to do engineering, and for the past almost year, we've been studying the property, particularly studying the property. We did a formal middle school study to where the middle school should be located. We looked at 8 prospective sites along the property and settled on the site that is shown in this rezoning case as the best opportunity, as the easiest to get an extension of utilities and the closest to the communities that needed the middle school. So the completion of that study and the other studies we did for the utilities extension brought us to where we are today, which is requesting rezoning in accordance with those goals. I think that's the last I wanted to say about that. Yeah, okay. Another reason why, and this is more about why now. I know it's been compared already in the community meeting to West Creek. Why don't we have West Creek? If you will look here at this slide, West Creek was rezoned in 1988. White Oak, a similar park, was zoned in 1990. Innsbrook in 1970, and Meadowville in 1996. They've taken till now to develop. These things are things to happen. We need to get the zoning in place in order to start the overall marketing and planning and infrastructure requests that we need to put it in place. This is, I don't want to give the citizens or the planning commission the impression that overnight this thing's going to have 5,000 jobs and $4 billion worth of capital investment. That's not the plan. This is planned to develop as most parks develop. Meadowville was in 1996. The first project went in 2005, and we're out of running out of property now. So this is to designate the property in the future plans so everybody can count on it, rely on it, market to it, sell to it, and so forth. I will also, there's a few of you on the commission that I know, and probably most of you, that West Creek in 1988 was zoned M2, which is equivalent to our I2, for the Motorola semiconductor plant, and was selected by Motorola. They chose not to continue that project, and then all of the things that we have listed here then occurred. So the other reason why is the state is, you saw that thing I put up there in the beginning about 45,000 jobs and $75 billion worth of opportunity we could not get because we did not have the sites. That is the single most important theme of the state from an economic development standpoint at this point. We have had sites in Chesterfield, we would have had our share of those programs, I can guarantee you that. They are going to put their money where their mouth is about getting sites developed in the state of Virginia in order to compete on the world stage for these jobs that are going to be created by the new electrical and digital manufacturing processes that are going to come out because of the FDI, the reshoring, the pharmaceutical opportunities that we have, they are going to get sites in place that can receive these projects. In this year's budget is $150 million to assist in the development of these sites, which could be used for helping us extend the water and sewer and improve the roads and do other things for this site. So we are anxious to get this site in that program. We cannot have it in the Business Ready Sites program unless it is zoned appropriately. The other funding sources like Smart Scale also require that it's an economic development project, that it is zoned appropriately. So we are very anxious to get the project zoned so that we can market it to the state and to the legislature so that we can receive some of that funding for the development of these sites. The last point I'd like to make is not so much for the why, but a little bit for the why. It became clear in the beginning of the engineering on this that in order to provide the proper distance from the existing communities that are out there, that the development of the technology park would be west of the Powhite, and the Powhite made the absolute most ideal barrier between the uses, and it would allow for the functioning of a residential component as well as the schools, and while keeping the job creation in the project as a large scale. So if you look at the slide here, 8,500 feet from Summer Lake, 6,400 feet from the middle school, 8,200 feet from Westerly, 72 from Magnolia. That all of those are in excess of a mile. Okay, so I don't think it's hard for people to get their mind around 2,000 acres. This is a big site. By keeping everything west of the Powhite, I think we provide adequate buffer and transition area to low-density residential, and then to the schools, and then to the existing communities. That completes my presentation. I'm happy to answer questions. I know Steve's got some more stuff he wants to tell you, and I can answer the questions after, or we can talk right now. It's perfectly.
We can, if you don't mind, we'll go ahead and ask you a few questions.
Sure.
Commissioner Owens?
So sure. You mentioned back on the second slide about a study you guys did in Q1 of 2020. Is that study available to publish and look through, or can you provide any excerpts of that study to give some of the information?
It is not, and we never published it and delivered it to anybody because we do still have a desire for those other sites. So we don't want to do speculation and let the world know that we're looking at them for competitive reasons.
Commissioner Sloan?
Garrett, would you mind, just for the sake of the commission and everybody else that maybe is listening to this, you and I probably had more interaction because normally we're talking about these kind of projects down in the Bermuda district. But in the 6 years that I've been on the commission, there's one thing that I've noticed that I'd like for you to speak a little bit more to. There are several sites in the Bermuda district that have been privately owned, right? That have been zoned industrial, that probably as a county, we would have loved the opportunity to be more strategic in the businesses that located on those sites, right? A lot of industrial sites that have been privately owned have kind of been sold to somebody that's willing to pay the price, and whether it's beneficial to the tax base of the county or not. I do think it's important to understand the importance of the fact that Meadowville really was purchased in 1996. And there's two points that I'd like to speak to, but then I'd like for you to maybe just speak to, from your perspective, of the ability to control the site versus having to react to some of the other sites that we've had to work through over the years. But the fact that Meadowville was started in 1996, it was originally, I remember, I'm old enough to remember, and it may have been your predecessors. I don't think it was you in 96, was it?
No, sir. I was in the private sector working on it in 96.
Okay. I believe they envisioned chemical plants along that stretch of the river, and we were going to become Hopewell too. Nothing against our good friends in Hopewell, but fortunately, it didn't come that way. But there are still sites, not many, but there are still some sites in Meadowville that are available because the county does control them.
That's correct.
And just because somebody wants to buy them or occupy them, we don't have to.
That's correct.
And, I would look at Meadowville and, there's a lot of debate about traffic and all this other kind of stuff, but do you feel a project like Meadowville from a technology standpoint, the type of employers that the county wants to attract, that's where we're trying to go with this other site?
You had a lot of questions,
Sorry.
a lot of questions in there, but I'll answer the last one.
I'll use 20
I'll
words
answer
when
the
5
last
could
one.
have sufficed.
Yeah, I'll answer the last one first. There is some debate that having Amazon in there was more distribution and less manufacturing and tech. But what I would say about that is the capital investment that they made into the park in the middle of the 2008 recession revived the community and started this growth spurt that we have now. So, and the capital investment inside of automation makes them worth as much or more than a manufacturer from a tax density standpoint. And it was quite a few jobs, and it got the infrastructure paid for there. What I would say is the rest of the industries and businesses that are in the park, from a brand notoriety, are the best there are in the world. Everybody in there is the number one at what they do, okay? We have brand notoriety. Amazon is the biggest at what it does. Medline is the biggest at what it does. Niagara is the biggest at what it does. Digital Fortress is a European data center. They're as big as in Europe as anybody. They're starting in the U.S. here. Meadowville is very much a success from a brand standpoint and from a job creation standpoint. From capital investment, Meadowville is currently worth a penny a year. It generates a penny's worth of tax base every year. And we've got one site left for approximately 300 acres, and all the rest of the sites are 40 acres or less. We have one other industrial site not owned by us in the county in the Bermuda district that's a little over 150 some acres, and that's it. Back to your comment about having control and deciding what goes there. Had we had control of many of the industrial parks along the 95 corridor, they would not have distribution in them. They would have more manufacturing. And that's the Z-mod is all part of that. It's trying to make sure that we do not, that we get the maximum tax density that we can get, and we get the companies with the brands that we want in these parks. And ownership represents the ultimate way to do that. In this rezoning case, we have eliminated distribution as a use by right and only as an auxiliary use, because we do not want that to happen. We are not going to consider this as a distribution park. We're looking for much higher quality. We're looking for technology-driven jobs and technology-driven investment here. I think that it is very important to let everybody understand that the Board of Supervisors, I can bring the craziest thing in the world in here to buy a parcel of this land. The Board of Supervisors will decide whether it gets sold to them or not. So that's ultimate control as to who goes into this park. A private developer is going to sell it to the guy who offers him the most money, as long as it fits within the proffers, as what the conditions are. Did I get it all?
Can I ask a follow-up question, Garrett, just
Yeah.
for the benefit of those who might be listening? You said that 1 cent per year tax base. Do you mean like what would be equal to 1 cent of real estate tax?
$3.3 million.
Thank you. I just want to.
Yeah, that's about the tax rate.
Okay, do any other commissioners have any questions for Mr. Hart before we move on to Mr. Epps?
I I just had one
Director Gillies?
thing I wanted maybe for Garrett to elaborate on is, there's been some questions at some of the community meetings about, why do we need to do this now in reference to zoning it to a employment use? But to get those type of tenants that you're talking about or prospects, they won't even look your way until you have the property pre-zoned and ready to go. And so you're not even in the conversation for marketing to those type of prospective employers for Chesterfield until we have this zoned and ready to go. And that's just a different way than you approach retail or office broker. This is a long process. It takes 5 to 10 years to kind of develop a park to actually function, and you need this kind of in place before you can even really start having serious conversations with prospective employers.
That is correct. The type of jobs we are trying to attract here, the type of quality investment in manufacturing and automation we are trying to attract here, is highly sought after throughout this country. The people who create those jobs and do those businesses do not have to go to a place where they have to wait for a rezoning or go through a public process or go to a place where they have to wait for the utilities to put in place. They are not going to do that because they have other options. So in order for us to be in this competition, we have to have sites that are already zoned and ready to go and have the ability to pull the utilities in place in the timeline that they have for construction, or either have them in place already. One last comment back to yours on the ownership part. To be considered a top-tier industrial site by the state of Virginia and marketed that way, it has to be under public control. So that's an additional reason that we would have control of that. But Andy's absolutely correct. We're not at ground zero. We're not started at all unless we're zoned.
Commissioner Hilton?
Yeah, I was going to make that point that you were making, that you can't, reading some of the comments from citizens, you can't, and hearing some of the discussion, you can't zone it once you've been identified. You have to zone it now and then be identified. So that's kind of like the key point in discussions with citizens. I think that needs to be communicated maybe more effectively on our end as a county, or maybe just something, I don't know, some other way to communicate that. So, because you have some people that are saying, well, why can't you find those companies and then zone it? But the zoning process is too long for them to wait for us to get it zoned, the land to get zoned properly. And I was probably a little bit naive in that also, before stepping into this role, admittedly, that, I was thinking, hey, a corporation could come here and then they want to zone it and it happens magically overnight, but they don't understand everything that kind of goes into it, where utilities and the impact of transportation and all that sort of thing has to be in line with the plan before the company is even attracted to your locality. So I think that's important.
Yeah. There's two specific things there. One is time. They just do not, they haven't allowed themselves the time to meet their production levels or whatever to go through a year-long rezoning process, even of 3 months. And the second is risk. They're not going to tell the world what they're going to do and then risk it to getting denied. They're not going to do that. So in order to be ready to go, we have to be zoned and ready to go. My last comment would be, I think the Board of Supervisors has diligently worked on this property for over a year and has said at every opportunity that it was their intent to turn this property into job creation, lower density residential, and school campus. They've said it at every opportunity that an event has occurred. What the board is asking of the Planning Commission now is to further refine that vision, receive public comment, and put in place the proffers that ensure that we have the finest technology park we can have, the finest low-density residential community we can have, and the finest school campus we can have. But that is what the property was purchased for and designated for by the board.
Commissioner Owens?
Yeah, so one comment I wish is, and, last Thursday we had a meeting where we had a bunch of people from the community here. I really wish we would have had some meeting, maybe even a month before that, where you went through similar to what you just did. Because I'll be honest, up until this point, the why behind this, I was a little cloudy on. So now I have a little bit of a base starting to build on top of, because I'm not building yet, but this actually provides a lot of context to what's trying to happen out there. And I think that means a lot to the public, and I know it means a lot to the commission to understand a little bit of this. So thank you for taking the time to do this. And
It's a process.
well, as a lesson learned, I think when the county looks to do large-scale projects like this, we can do a why at the beginning of this and not violate any kind of agreements we have, if we have agreements with companies or anything like that, and give the community a why at the beginning, and then maybe that'll help start a little bit better dialogue.
It's a little bit of a unique scenario here. It's happened many times in Chesterfield because we are aggressive about proper development, and the board has throughout the years decided that in order to make it happen right and to get what is best for all, that they would be the applicant. But, you've got the Board of Supervisors who's now the applicant, trying to act like an applicant, but then at the same time, trying to get the information across on why we're doing what we're doing. And it gets clunky, and I apologize for that, and it probably would have been better for me to speak first. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hart.
Sure.
And I think the next person that was going would be Mr. Donohoe.
Back. All yours.
All right, I'm going to provide the planning overview, and undoubtedly there's going to be some overlap, so please, pardon me for that. But just to back up a little bit, the county did purchase the land about a year ago, and it was done so for the purpose of getting a better handle, starting to control some of the expansive residential growth on the Western 360 corridor, as well as pursuing future economic development opportunities. And this was obviously done with the idea of bringing jobs closer to where people are. So the site, the overall site is roughly 2,428 acres, and this is one project that we've organized this. This is one project overall, but we've organized it into two zoning cases. They're referred to as Upper Magnolia East and Upper Magnolia Green West. So again, as I mentioned, the county began this process a year ago with the purchase of the land. The next step in being able to ultimately be able to do anything with the property is the entitlement process, which is where we are today, where we are now, to change the zoning from primarily R9 residential, and there's also a substantial amount that's agriculturally zoned. The board initiated rezoning of the property. The area that we have shown there in red, the red dotted area, that was initiated. That's 1,850 acres initiated by the board in September. And then the next month in October, we added 589 acres to the rezoning request. Together, the property that makes up the entirety of the Upper Magnolia Green project. This area, along with what is referred to as Magnolia Green or Lower Magnolia Green, the majority of the area that you see there in red, that was rezoned back in 1991. Which established roads in that project, as well. The right-of-way for Parkway was established. That stretches through the property, as you can see in the middle of the property there with the red lines. So we have What this is, it's a rezoning boundary plan, which shows the project broken into those two companion rezoning requests I mentioned. We have the west in blue, that's the 1,728 acres on the west side of Poway Parkway alignment, or future Parkway alignment, as well as the orange there on the east side, that's 700 acres there. And then you have the purple coursing through, which is the right-of-way for Poway Parkway. This map shows also the greater context of the area, showing the neighborhoods that you have just that are relatively nearby along Otterdale. You have the Westerly and Summer Lake that are probably the nearest communities to this property on the northeastern side of the project. This would be where the Upper Magnolia East project portion is the residential and school site project, so that would be the series of uses proposed that are going to be nearest to Westerly and Summer Lake. You also have, of course, development further east along Woolridge Road, and then you have Magnolia Green to the south. We've heard from a lot of folks in these neighborhoods. As mentioned before, we had a community meeting last week, well attended, feedback provided. We heard from folks. We are going to be going back out to the community and holding additional meetings, so we're working through the details of those meetings being scheduled. So what is actually being proposed? The description of the Upper Magnolia West project, it's 1,728 acres going from R9 residential to agricultural to I2, which is a general industrial to allow for the development of what we're calling a technology village, but really what this is an employment center, allowing for uses such as advanced manufacturing, research and development. Of course, some office uses would be a potential here, as well as we know that there's going to be a need for some public facilities that would serve this area. Planning worked very closely with economic development to determine what uses we should include in this project to reach that to creating an employment center in this area. The uses that we have are these listed on this slide here. These are going to be the permitted uses that will be proffered. So it's not a lot of uses. In going through this exercise with economic development, we wanted to make sure that we were identifying the least intense zoning district possible that would accommodate for these uses. So that's how we targeted the I2 general industrial zoning district. And just for folks unfamiliar out there with our zoning ordinance, you have light industrial would be I1. This is general industrial. The next category up, which might come to mind when you hear the word industrial, that's the I3 zoning district. A lot of heavy and intense uses permitted there. This is I2, that's kind of that midpoint. And a lot of these uses are actually permitted in the I1 zoning district today. So I just want to make that clarification.
Can I ask a question about this slide, just for clarification? What's listed on this slide, even though there might be more uses listed in I2, when this case comes to fruition, this is the uses?
That's
it's
correct.
not whatever else is in I2, this is the uses?
You're correct.
Okay,
That's
I
the
just wanted to
approach.
make sure that
Yep.
point was made.
This list, so a lot of talk about prepared proffers, right? So what we're going to be doing at the end of this process is having a set of proffers that will show these permitted uses. And that's what you see here at this point. That's what we have. This isn't the end of the process. There could be an opportunity for other things to be discussed, maybe things being removed, perhaps added. However, this is where we are. This is what we have targeted, again, through that exercise with economic development. This is what we believe would deliver an employment center that would achieve the jobs that are targeted. So some attention was paid to, in the previous part of the presentation, about distribution, warehouse uses. I wanted to clarify here that we've listed that as something that cannot be standalone or principal use, so that distribution, logistics use would not be permitted by itself in this part of the county or within this project.
What's the reason behind that?
So in a couple slides, I'm going to talk about a project we're comparing it to, and I'll go into that just shortly. So just to clarify what Upper Magnolia East is, it's a rezoning from R9, same zoning districts, R9 and agricultural, but going to an R15 zoning district. So that's a residential district of minimum 15,000 square foot lots, and we set a unit cap of 600 residential units. Of that 700 acres, Upwards of 200 of those acres will be going towards a public use site, and that would be containing at least a middle school, high school. High school would also, potentially be permitted in this or be located on this site, as well as an elementary school and a library. The 600 units, if at full build-out, what that calculation means in terms of density on the 500 acres, that's 1.2 dwelling units per acre. When you compare that to some of the surrounding residential, the suburban style residential that you have just to the east along Otterdale, it's less dense than what you have at Westerly and Summer Lake, and it's also less dense than what you have in the proposed Cold Creek development, which is undeveloped right now, but it abuts this property just to the east, and they're roughly 1.47 dwelling units per acre, and then 2 dwelling units per acre is proposed for the park at Cold Creek that actually has frontage on Otterdale. So the idea, as you head kind of westerly into this site, you have a step down in density. Thought that would be appropriate in this location. What does the comprehensive plan provide us in terms of guidance for this property? On the east side of the Parkway Parkway, you have Suburban Residential 1. The R15 zoning district being a residential zoning district, of course, again, a lower density residential district. It does align and implement that part of the comprehensive plan. And on the west side, you do have an underlying Suburban Residential 1 designation. However, you do have an overlay of that hatched area that you see that's noted as future growth area. And what the comprehensive plan provides us in terms of guidance here is the comp plan is supportive of economic development goals, and in particular, is supportive of development proposals that are well designed and also have result in quality development and further the economic development goals for the county. The comp plan also contains a number of economic development policies supportive of identifying and creating employment-generating uses that support new and growing job opportunities in the county. So that kind of brings us to why the county went to, with purchasing this land in the first place. This, again, to revisit that, to create employment opportunities closer to where people live. The area in purple shows the Upper Magnolia property falls within one of the fastest growing areas in the county. This area has outpaced the rest of the county relative to population growth over the last 9 to 10 years. However, when you compare that with where we have our job centers, and that's what you see there in the red dots, you can see that there is a substantial void as it relates to having a centralized employment center in this part of the county. So this project does set out to change that. However, as stated before previously, the development of the site as well as the job creation is not something that's going to happen overnight. And we're aware of that, and that's not the expectation here. So as stated before, Meadowville was zoned back in 1996. That's a successful example that we would look to in this model of bringing forward a county-initiated employment center. That was zoned in 1996. It's still in a state of development as we have it today here in 2021. The surrounding land uses, just to continue with existing conditions, the surrounding land uses, we have Horner Park just to the north. We have a bikeway and trails plan that shows connections to Horner Park. Ultimately, we want to make sure that we're accomplishing that with this project. So we've accommodated for trails that stretch from Hull Street through Lower Magnolia Green and upwards into Upper Magnolia Green and ultimately to connect to Horner Park. We certainly want to continue that and carry that through this project. The area in green, the light green, that indicates these are existing land uses. That indicates either a vacant or undeveloped piece of property, and that there's a lot of that to the north, south, and west of the site. There's also a large amount of large lot, single-family lots, and so you see that along Mosley Road there and to the south of the site as well. And so we're accommodating some for buffers and things like that in the for the western side of this property. And then of course there's greater density suburban residential, which I already referenced with Lower Magnolia Green and communities along Otterdale and Woolridge. This is the Magnolia Green approved plan from 1991. I thought I would show this, it would be good for people to see, just because there's, I did receive a fair amount of questions in the lead up to this from the community in regards to infrastructure, in particular roads infrastructure, and what does the county have planned? Does the county have a plan? That type of thing. And so the answer is we absolutely do. We've had in the comprehensive plan since 1989 a thoroughfare plan which shows the road network in this area as well as elsewhere in the county. But in this plan in 1991, proved shortly thereafter that plan became part of our comprehensive plan, which does kind of make good on some of those road alignments that were included in that thoroughfare plan. So Powhite, namely, as you can see, goes through the property even back then. Thank you, Steve. And then the extension of Westerly Parkway was another thing of discussion. Excellent. And then we have a north-south road that was contemplated even back in 1991 when this was approved zoning. The concept plan for the Upper Magnolia West. Just to review some of the design elements here, what we've done, we've kind of largely geared our the features of this plan to somewhat isolate this property from what's surrounding it in terms of buffers and preserving buffers and having screening. So we have a 100-foot buffer proposed along the north, west, and southern portions of the Upper Magnolia West site. And of course, this is to address the kind of dissimilar use interplay that we might have between the agriculturally zoned properties that exist in those directions as they abut with this property. We have a 200-foot buffer proposed along Powhite Parkway. And again, that just speaks to what I mentioned with having substantial screening. We want to make sure that we're doing screening and buffering as best we can through the preservation of existing mature trees. It's one of the things we do have out there. We do have that opportunity to preserve a fair amount of trees in establishing those buffers. Other things we're looking to do, because it is a technology village concept, we want to have a campus style. The technology park would be ideal. We'll have proffers that kind of get at those elements, architectural proffers, screening, as I mentioned, coordinated signage, those types of elements that really do help to kind of create an identity. What is Upper Magnolia Green West, or whatever the ultimate name might be of it? That type of thing, the branding aspect. There's also likely to be a need, as I mentioned, public infrastructure, a fire station perhaps on the Upper Magnolia West side, as well as a water tower. And Commissioner Hilton, getting to your question, Meadowville comparison. We look to our successful examples of doing this type of thing in the past. As I mentioned, this was zoned in 1996. I just wanted to show folks the layout of what was contemplated and what is developing in Meadowville. With it being an established technology park, the property was zoned to accommodate logistics, data center, office, and other corporate investment type of uses. When we were thinking through what was appropriate in this site, meaning the Magnolia Green property, and understanding that a lot of the things that came out of Meadowville, the lessons learned, and a lot of the positive things we wanted to carry over. However, not everything translates perfectly. So because of the understanding of the issues that exist in this part of the county, maybe traffic, namely, being something we hear quite a lot about on the Western 360 corridor, we wanted to restrict a heavy traffic generating use, when that would be that distribution facility. So that gets at the reasoning for why we thought that would not be an appropriate use to have as a standalone primary use in the Upper Magnolia Green site. So that's what you have for Upper Magnolia Green. West, again, just some of the design elements.
Commissioner?
Okay. These are successful, attractive building designs that we have. Again, creating that campus concept, that campus design that we think that was created well in the Meadowville community, and we want to make sure that we have the appropriate language in the proffers to help establish this type of thing for the implementation of the development of Upper Magnolia Green in the future. We do have a conceptual plan for the Upper Magnolia East property, and this is it at large, and I'll zoom in a bit to show more of the features that I think are noteworthy here. much of what you see are features that are going to be pulled out and in the language of the proffers are also, it's going to be included in the proffer statement. So the unit cap is 600 units for Upper Magnolia East. That'll be a proffer. The fact that it's going to R15 and it's 15,000 square foot lots, all things contained in the proffers. This conceptual plan itself will be something that we're going to include in the proffers, so we have a level of substantial conformance to this when we are going on to the next part of the process, be it subdivision plan review. Architectural features per our normal standards would be applied in these proffers as well. Again, establishing kind of a community identity through coordinated signage. Those features we certainly want to have included. Landscaping. I mentioned the trail, the connection up to Horner Park. These lines that you see connecting the different neighborhoods that you see in green that are listed as R15, that would be a way to facilitate that northward connection up towards the extension of Westerly Parkway, which we would then have a further connection to points north and west, which would be where Horner Park is located. But of course, we want to make sure that we're developing this site in a responsive fashion to environmental features. Same logic with the western portion, but we've actually shown the areas where we expect that could be developed with residential development on the east side and north side, east and west sides of this environmental feature that courses through the property. That's Horse Pen Creek that kind of cuts the property in half. But we do think it'd be a great feature to have this trail, a robust trail connection that takes you from the community neighborhoods that you see there in green up to the school site, and really do aim towards creating that community feel amongst this Upper Magnolia East site. This is the preliminary design for the school. This is the public use site I mentioned. This is going to accommodate the middle school first, as well as a high school. I mentioned elementary school, the associated ball fields for all three, and a library. And so I show this just because it sounds like a lot going on to this site, but it can be accommodated within this designated area. Of course, this is very preliminary. A lot of the features that you see here, the environmental features, as we get to further points in the review and the establishment of where those buildings and where these features are going to go, the areas of disturbance, all of that will be further refined through the subdivision and site plan process. But this is a very exciting part of the project, obviously. The county has listened to the needs of to the folks in this part of the county. Now we're delivering the schools component. And so lastly, the project takeaways, similar to what Garrett had mentioned. First, we're reducing the number of already entitled residential lots. I didn't even talk about that before, but we're going from what's entitled now, which is 1,400 residential units, going down to 600. So it's a substantial decrease in the number of residential lots permitted. Secondly, the project is a proactive measure by the county to improve the marketability of the site for future investment. Also job potential, as well as increasing the non-residential tax base. And lastly, the delivery of the school site is substantial. So with that, we do have a project web page that we've created, which is getting a lot of use. We'll continue to have that out there as a resource for the community. And with that does it for me. I can take questions, or I can hold off and let.
Commissioner Sloan?
Just out of curiosity, on the economic development side, on the western side of Powhite, any idea, any preliminary, and Garrett said that they've done some preliminary engineering, maybe he knows. So when we take out, because I don't think, if memory serves me correctly, topography is not necessarily our best friend out there. How much acreage do we potentially lose to RPA, streams, creeks, and do we have a ballpark estimate of how many pad sites that could generate when we're said and done with ruling out all of the land we can't use?
We have substantial RPAs and wetlands all across the property on both sides of the Powhite. We will put that onto the website, exactly how much there is. We've delineated it completely.
Do you have just a preliminary ballpark on how many employment sites you envision in this project?
It's, with the inclusion of the additional properties for the other owners and so forth, it's, it all depends, okay? If you want 100-acre sites, there's 10 of those, probably. If it's, a 500-acre site and 300-acre site, there's 3 or 4. I don't see us having, it's going to be more the Meadowville line in that, we'll end up, it could go from 1 or 2 large formats to maybe 10 to 15 total companies altogether in the property. It's not, it's not.
So it is fairly comparable to Meadowville,
Yes.
sort of from a site standpoint and what the county could yield out
Yeah,
of that over time.
when you think about what we're after here, the jobs that we're after and the quality investment we're after, we're talking about something that's going to consume between 100 and 300 acres a pop. Okay, so it's not going to be like the air park where you got 15-acre lots and there's 300 of them. It's going to be 10 to 15.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Commissioner Hilton?
Could you, or Steve, could you all, I guess, tell that some of the similarities to the zoning, rezoning process as a county does it versus if, let's just say a company comes in and they want to rezone this area, or could you explain the similarities and maybe some things that are different in this process because the county is doing it, or is it all the same? And I don't want to put you on the spot or something.
No, it's pretty much the same. In that, with one change, at the end of the day, the board is going to vote on something that they've wanted to happen. Okay. The board is in the position of any other, the subdivision developers, the mixed-use developers that show up here for a rezoning. They are the same. They're an applicant. They have presented to you their vision of what they want to do with the property as an applicant, and they are asking to work with you to refine that vision and to accomplish that development. All of that's the same, okay? It's just that the board of supervisors is not an individual developer looking to develop a nice community and make a profit. The board is a developer looking to maximize the highest and best use of the property for the overall good of the county.
Yeah, and I bring that up because you're still going to hold county, you're going to still hold community meetings, you're still engaging citizens, you're trying to figure out what they want, what they like in the development. You're still working with all the same departments. The county's going to still hold itself to the same standards that we have other developers held to.
It's going to require the negotiation to make sure that the proffers are in place and are properly done, and that transportation is satisfied with how it's going to do. Environmental engineering is satisfied as what it's going to do at the zoning level.
Right.
And so all of those things are still in place. Yes,
Yeah,
sir.
I can attest that they're going through the same process that a private business would go through if they were trying to rezone this to I-2 piece of property. The idea of, the way it's going through the TRC, it's going through, the community meetings, everything is the same, and probably even more scrutiny because it is the county trying to make sure we're answering questions and trying to provide information. If it had been a private industry coming in and trying to do this, or a broker trying to do this, we may have more questions as to, who is your client for this. But since we are in control of it, and it is a speculative zoning case, but the beauty of it is we are in control of that property afterwards, so we can be very selective as to who goes into that property. But from an environmental standpoint, transportation standpoint, fire, police, everybody is still going through this case like any other case would go before a zoning.
You know, I only ask that for the benefit of citizens who
Right.
ask, you know.
It's a good
they might say, hey,
question.
the county's gonna alleviate themselves from, you know, working with utilities or transportation or fire or any other department, right? But if we know that we're also working through those, internally working through those departments to make sure that this project meets all the boxes, if you will, checks all the boxes, then, you know, I just wanted that to be kind of put into the air, and give you the opportunity to say that, because you know, if you look at some of the comments or even have heard some of the chatter from citizens, you know, they believe that the county is not doing that, which is not the case, and you're trying to explain, hey, the county is doing the same thing that a private developer would do. So I just want to highlight that perspective.
In going through the TRC process, for example, we're asking each of the departments to tell us, you know, what proffers do you want on this property? Give us the language you want for that proffer, for that piece of property. Normally, we have to go back and forth and negotiate and argue with an applicant as to, you know, what's reasonable and what's not. We're getting it directly from the departments as to, here's what we want, and those are what we're moving forward with as the proffers for these projects. So I think the bar is even a bit higher than we would for a private investor trying to do this same project.
Yeah, I would just highlight that in future presentations and just make sure the citizens understand that. So it's not a force-feeding type of project. This is actually the county working internally with departments independent of itself to figure out what needs to happen for the success of the project. So.
I thank you for bringing that up. Thank you.
And I think to build on that, Commissioner Hilton, Director Gillies, it's not just working with the internal county departments. It's also going through the process of having the community meetings and hearing from the citizens what they may be concerned about as far as the impacts on schools, on their property values, the roads. And so that part of the process is vetting all of those issues, hearing from the citizens what the concerns, what the issues are, and coming up with proffered conditions that will address and try to mitigate those impacts so that the citizens will feel that they've also had their concerns and issues considered as well, just like any other zoning case.
One of the questions that we've gotten from the community has to do with the zoning initiation. You know, a zoning initiation done by the county is a little bit different than an application. It basically is a pseudonym for an application. But the question I've been asked is, under the board action requirement, it says the agent for the board, where it's appointing Mr. Gillies, and waive disclosure requirements. And one of the questions from the community is, what are the disclosure requirements that we're waiving?
Yes, yeah, the board initiates through a board item that's presented to the board at a public hearing. The board initiates the rezoning of certain acreage. In this case, they did it in two parts, as I mentioned, one in September, one in October. But we're treating this the same, going back to the previous question, we're treating this the same as all other board or planning commission initiated requests, where the zoning ordinance gives the ability to waive disclosure agreement for initiated items. It's in the zoning ordinance, and this is typical for a planning commission initiated or a board initiated rezoning request. So that's the way we've treated this project, and so the application material.
What does waive disclosure mean? What are we waiving
So
disclosure
if
for?
we have an applicant that were to come in and essentially, petition for a property to be rezoned, they would have some legal documents, these waiver disclosure agreements, which consist of financial disclosures, their interest in the property, that type of thing.
I think I understand what you're saying. So if there was like something in the works for this property behind the scenes through EDA, or if it's something like somebody didn't want to disclose they have an interest in this property because it could affect their business, this is waiving the requirement to disclose that. Is that am I thinking wrong, or am I right in thinking that?
All the disclosure really is listing who has an interest in that particular piece of property. With the zoning that we have here before you, it's EDA, basically the property, and this county is going to be the property owner. We can, it's typical for us not to request disclosure information when it is a county-initiated case, because there may be reasons for trying to keep some of the owner information confidential. But in this situation, it really is not a big issue. We're happy to place that information on the website as to the potential, or the property owners that are involved with this and their percentage of financial interest in this. It's
Thank you.
it's merely just, since it's a county project, that isn't really a big issue for us to typically handle. We're happy to provide that information. By right and by law, we have the ability not to include that, but we're happy to provide that. It's not a big deal.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, so, Mr. Donohoe, does that conclude your presentation, or? Yes, it does. And now, Mr. Epps? Thank you.
Afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the commission, Director Gillies. Wanted to come before you this afternoon to give you a brief update on the traffic impact analysis that we are currently performing through a consultant, give you some idea of the scope and schedule of that study, as well as go over sort of the magnitude of the amount of work that we're undertaking. So before you, you see a map that locates the east and west cases, as well as highlights the thoroughfare plan roads throughout this area of the county. We have highlighted in gold circles the number of intersections that we are looking at and have included within the study. And just to give you a little bit of an idea about the bones of it, the traffic data that's being used in the study was collected in 2019 and 2021. We've grown the data and adjusted for COVID-related impacts through an adjustment factor in both the morning and afternoon peak hours. A conservative growth rate of 2% was developed based on the Richmond Transportation Planning Organization Regional Travel Demand Model. We used historical traffic count data to better underscore that 2%. We looked at the VDOT statewide planning system database, another study that we currently have underway on Route 360, as well as some socioeconomic data. We are using the most recent edition of the Trip Generation Manual, which is the 11th edition, and we've distributed the trips throughout the area utilizing streetlight data collected as a part of the Route 360 corridor study I mentioned previously, as well as some Richmond TPO regional traffic demand modeling select zone analysis. I know this is enough to put everyone to sleep, but wanted to give you a brief background on some of that information that we've used. So again, we looked at a total of 20 intersections. Of the 20 that we reviewed, we currently have 13 proposed to receive improvements as a part of either case, and 9 roadway segments are to be improved. So jumping into the western case, everything you see listed on the slide below would include additional travel lanes or turn lanes, interchange and intersection improvements, intersection control, and bike and pedestrian accommodations as determined by a subsequent traffic study that we will require with the initial and phased developments. So what we're looking at is, as a part of the proffered conditions for the western case, we're going to request dedication of right-of-way for the Powhite Parkway, the Powhite Parkway interchanges, the north-south arterials as a part of the thoroughfare plan, Westerly Parkway, the east-west arterials in the thoroughfare plan, and I'll review those in just a moment. The Duval Road intersection, as well as portion of Duval Road, Mosley Road, and adjacent stub roads that will be determined by us. Further, prior to any site plan or subdivision plan approval, an access plan for roads noted for the right-of-way dedication will be submitted to and approved by CDOT. And in conjunction with initial development, the developer shall submit for approval by CDOT a traffic impact analysis and plan for the overall development, showing the road improvements necessitated by the proposed uses and densities. And at each phase of the development, a traffic study for those portions of the road improvements necessitated by that phase of the development will be submitted to us as well. So while we've identified a slate of improvements as a part of the traffic study we're conducting, we are requiring the developer to submit an additional study to provide a phasing plan for the list of improvements that you see here. On the east side, we're also requesting dedication of the rights-of-way for the Poway Parkway, the north-south arterials, Westerly Parkway, the north-south collector, sections of Duval Road, and the Duval Road intersections. What we've done on the east case is identify a suite of improvements, but have also quantified improvements that have to be done upon the initial development, which is the construction of the middle school. Those improvements would include reconstruction of Otterdale Road and the Duval Road intersection with the traffic signal and/or innovative intersection as determined. Intersection control and improved turn lanes, which could potentially include a free flow right turn lane from eastbound Westerly Parkway to southbound Otterdale Road with an acceleration lane at the Otterdale Road and Westerly Parkway intersection. Additionally, those improvements with the middle school would include construction of 2 lanes of Westerly Parkway and the associated improvements from the existing terminus of Westerly Parkway to the north-south Collector Road intersection, as well as left and right turn lanes at that intersection. Finally, we will be requiring 2 lanes of the north-south Collector Road and associated improvements from Westerly Parkway to the southern terminus of the school site. Let's go back here real quick. So one thing I did want to note this is a copy of the thoroughfare plan roadways with the rezoning cases overlaying on it, along with the associated intersection improvements. If you'll note within the boundaries of the western case, several north-south arterials that are currently on the thoroughfare plan and several east-west arterials. One at the southern end is really realigning Duval Road through intersection 16. We would expect these roadways to be included in a phase plan by the developer of the western case, such that they may shift north or south, east or west, to best accommodate the layout of the proposed uses of the case. We don't want to lock the development of the western case into saying you have to lay your site out around these roadways. We simply want to say this is the connectivity that we foresee as a transportation network, and allow the case to develop and propose connectivity as it comes in. We would expect the improvements to be phased, as we've heard previously. We don't expect all of this to develop all at once. We expect it to develop over time. So a phased approach to the improvements, including the Poway Parkway and other improvements, would be phased over the course of time. So with that, be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Commissioner Petrosky.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Epps, can you, I guess, just spend a moment clarifying the distinction between this zoning case will be dedicating right-of-way for the Poway versus funding the construction of the Powhite?
Yes, sir. So we do list the construction of the Powhite Parkway as an improvement required of the case. It simply means that the right-of-way needs to be dedicated as a part of that dedication process. And then once the development comes online, we would get a phased plan for improvements that would include construction of the list of improvements. So just going back to the Western case, the very first bullet is the construction of the Powhite Parkway from 360 to its existing terminus to the north. So we do anticipate the Western case building the Powhite extension at some point during the construction of the development of that case.
Okay, so would that use regional funds or would those be county funds?
So we would anticipate the developers coming in to build on the western side of the development. They would be responsible for building that improvement.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Sloan, did you have a question?
Do we anticipate, again, I'm kind of thinking of the Meadowville project, that there will be some sort of basic investment in road infrastructure in that project initially by the county or the state, and then as we see, future, I'm going to use word clients or businesses come to the park that in conjunction with the building of those specific projects, we would have some collaborative arrangement to build additional roads and so forth in there as part of their overall agreements. Is that a fairly fair statement? That some of it we're going to do, but then some of it's going to be collaborative with companies as they come online?
Yes, sir. I would expect that we would pursue funding for some of these improvements. We certainly have a lot going on in the area already that we need to complete, but as we've mentioned earlier, once the rezoning had its chance to run its course, if it's rezoned and we have the western case zoned for the industrial site, then we can look at utilizing that as an impetus for smart scale applications and other funding applications to complete some of these improvements.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Epps. I appreciate that. Mr. Donohoe, we only have about 4 minutes till our 4 o'clock case, but I wondered if you would just quickly tell us what our next steps are.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So this is obviously part of the process. We've held community meetings. We've got a lot of feedback. What we've done now, at that last community meeting that we had, it was discussed that we would be moving forward in the coming months for Planning Commission and, of course, board public hearings. We do, as I mentioned, we do know that we're going to go back out to at least the communities of Westerly and I believe Summer Lake to have discussion with those folks in the early part of the year. But we're here for additional guidance as well, and that's part of this discussion. We're here to share with you what the proposal is as well as get additional feedback from the Planning Commission.
One of the questions I had was, do you know when we might be able to look at proposed proffers or drafts, or do we not do it? It's a little different from proffers that are normally submitted with an application, but do you have a starting point with the proffered conditions?
We surely do, and we are going through, as stated before, we're following the same process we would with any other type of rezoning application. We're going through the TRC review process. We're asking all the review agencies that would typically provide comment, and then we would go back to an applicant and have a negotiation and what have you. Instead, folks are providing their comments, and we're asking them to kind of address that by way of a proffer. What would be something you'd like to see? A lot of the review agencies are doing that. We're in that process. We are compiling those comments to be able to have a draft proffer statement. Typically, we would present that as part of the case documents for the staff report that would go out. Now, that could be something we could look to provide a bit earlier and perhaps put it on our project webpage when it's ready. I wouldn't say we're there just yet. This is we're trying to continuously improve the product that we have. That is, again, why we go out to the community, get the feedback that we do, and we have more steps, that we need to, do in order to say that we have that document that's ready to go out in that form. So But that's a good comment, certainly something we're working through.
Okay, thank you.
I would, add to that, that we most likely can have at least a draft set of proffers by, the first of the year, after the holidays, probably posted maybe somehow on our webpage regarding this case, just to give people a little better idea of what those proffers may include. They still may be somewhat generic, but the
Yes.
idea that making sure we've covered the various bases that people may be concerned about, I think we could put something out.
I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay.
Did you have any other questions? We're, okay.
Thank you for your time.
Mr. Donohoe.
I think the 4 o'clock session's gonna be really short, so we'll have
We
plenty of time after the 4 o'clock session to continue conversation on the Upper Magnolia Green cases and the work program. So don't feel like we have to conclude now. If we want to have some time to gather your thoughts, we could do the 4 o'clock and then come back, continue some conversation on the Mag Green cases, and go from there.
So now we go back to our work session and our discussion items. Before we start with Mr. Hosh, I just want to ask, did commissioners have any other questions to follow up on the Upper Magnolia Green case presentation? Commissioner Sloan?
I had one last one for Brent, if he's still lurking back there, hiding behind Mr. Nannery.
I was running for the door.
So just out of curiosity, Brent, you mentioned that you're doing a traffic impact study. It sounds like it's very broad-based. But one particular statistic kind of stood out. So we've heard repeatedly that this part of the county has had the highest growth rates of any of the other, of most of the other areas in the county. In some instances, I think whatever the last 10 years, we've had a 10% growth and so forth. Do we think a 2% growth rate on the TIA is aggressive enough for a part of the county that's growing this rapidly?
Yes, sir, great question. So we have absolutely looked at historical data as well as more recent data, not only in this area, but as the county as a whole. So when we look and start projecting traffic, we use all of the land use data that we have to not only incorporate, existing traffic and traffic growth, but also approved cases in the area as well. So we're confident with a 2% rate that's going to get us to the level of improvements that we need. We're always open to listening to other proposals and ideas. So if there's a sort of a county feeling that we want to use a larger growth rate, we can look at that. It's just in our experience and looking at the broad area for the transportation study that we're performing, and based on the data that we have, 2% is adequate.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Owens?
So this is not really for Brett, this is just overall about the case, but thank you. Can I finish off the comments? Anybody else have any other comments they want to say? So I'm an avid reader, and one of the things that I used to do is read books and watch the movie, and I usually got let down by the movie. And I think in this case, we're seeing the movie version, and it's leaving out some of the important things out of the book. I think we're doing a good job of telling our story now and getting the story out. One of the things I'd like to see is a couple of focused meetings with the community, like a meeting that focuses just on transportation, that gives our transportation a chance to come out and speak to the community just on the transportation aspect of it. And then maybe a couple days later, have another meeting that speaks just on the environmental impact, so that we don't have the chaos of a large meeting where people come to grandstand and divert attention from a lot of these issues, and we can focus on the individual parts of this case. And I think we can use that, and maybe on the January 18th meeting, we can come back to the Planning Commission with an update during our work session on how some of those sessions went. We're not pressured to make an agenda to try to get it onto the Planning Commission agenda. We can have those meetings up to like a week before that time and be able to come in here and give an update to the planning commission and get more information out, get more input from the community, review that in that working session on the 18th and see if we can set a hearing or if we need more time. I don't know how people feel about that. If that's,
If I hear you right, what you're suggesting is, because that we've had, in some of the discussions that we've had at the community meeting, and such as having a public hearing on January 18th, what you're saying is instead of that, to have an additional study session on these two cases on January 18th.
right.
Try to fill in some of the details and issues that have come forward from the community as well as
Give people
from
the
you
book
all.
version and not the movie version.
And then after the conclusion of that study session, then
Yes,
possibly set a public hearing date.
correct.
Okay.
And Director Gillies, I think that would be particularly helpful for me because very tangible, literal kind of person. I like to see in writing, what the proffers are. And by then, I think I'm going to be familiar enough with the case and the issues to see how those proffers and conditions tie into addressing and mitigating those impacts. And I don't think we're going to have that unless we do go through the steps that Commissioner Owens was just suggesting. Commissioner Sloan?
I'd just like to build upon that. Kind of having gone here before and done this before, I think it is essential that the citizens and however many meetings are going to be scheduled, the citizens need to be able to see and read the final product. I don't think it would be helpful for us to just simply say, oh, this is going to be in the case, this is going to be in the case. I think they need to see the written proffers and so forth, so that when you have that community meeting, like Commissioner Owens was indicating, you can have a debate about the facts. And until I think certain things are in writing where citizens can see the writing on that, there will be discussions around what we're saying that we're going to do versus what is and isn't, and it just could make things drag out longer, trying to avoid that, I think.
I think we can provide a lot more of those type of details for the community meetings. I don't want to mislead the general public that, we would have a staff report out by, January 18th. That but we could have a lot of the information and put together and presented in a more comprehensive manner to them. I think we can handle that.